He was calling the old members of Aints Ool Gown. He attempted it with 1% hope, feeling 99% like nothing would come of it. As expected, there was no response. After calling all 40 members and confirming no response from anyone, he slowly shook his head. He'd known it was hopeless, but getting slapped in the face with reality was quite a downer. He cast the spell once more at Sebas. It connected, so it was clear that message was indeed alas working. There was still the possibility that it would only connect to characters in this world, but Lord Momonga. The deeply deferential voice echoed in his head. Momonga wondered if Sebas was bowing on the other end, like a businessman in the real world would have been. Sebas must have been unsure how to interpret the silence caused by Momonga's extraneous musing, because he spoke again, sounding perplexed. Is something wrong? Oh, sorry. It seems I spaced out for a moment. By the way, what's it like out there? We're on a grassy plain, and I haven't been able to confirm the existence of any intelligent life. A grassy plain, no bogs. The great tomb of Nazarick used to be located deep in a swamp inhabited by frog-like people known as Teasfakes. The whole area was covered by mist. There were poisonous bogs here and there. No, just a grassy plain. Momonga laughed, even though he wasn't sure why. Who knows what is going on now? So Nazarick as a whole has been teleported to some unknown location. Sebas, is there anything in the sky? Any signs or signals? No, nothing like that. Just the same night sky as the 6th level. What? A night sky, huh? Is there anything else in the area that catches your eye? No, not in particular. Aside from the great tomb of Nazarick, I don't even see any man-made structures. I see, what could he say? He felt like ripping his hair out, although he had been prepared for this possibility. Sebas's silence indicated he was awaiting direction. Momonga glanced at the band on his left wrist. There were about 20 minutes until the other guardians would arrive. He knew what he needed to do. Be back in 20 minutes. Once you've returned to the tomb, come to the amphitheatrum. I'm assembling all the guardians, so I'll have you report what you've seen. Understood. Okay, get as much information as you can before then. After getting Sebas's confirmation, he ended the spell. He was thinking he'd take a break, having finished everything he needed to do for the moment. Then he remembered the 2 children and their expectant gazes. He needed to show them the power of the staff of Aints Ool Gown, since he'd said he would. He took the staff into his hand, but couldn't decide what magic to unleash. It was as if all its countless powers were begging to be used. He should probably go for something pretty showy. So he chose the fire orb, and from among its powers cast Summon Primal Fire Elemental. Obeying Momonga's will, power stirred within a jewel in one of the snake's mouths. Sensing that the flow of power was adequate, he pointed the staff. A huge sphere of light grew at the end, and an incredible storm of flames whipped up around it. The vortex rapidly expanded to a diameter of 13 feet and a height of about 20 feet. The Crimson Purgatory kicked up a hot wind. Momonga saw the dragonkin move in front of Aura and Mare to protect them. His robe flapped in the waves of heat. It could have easily burned him, given the temperature, but Momonga had compensated for the weakness to fire he shared with all undead. He had perfect resistance, so he was unaffected. After increasing its size by consuming all the air nearby, the swaying tornado of flames emitted a glow like fusing iron. It took on a humanoid shape. The primal fire elemental was one of the highest level elementals, falling in the upper ATS range. Momonga felt the same connection with it that he had with the moon wolves. Whoa! A gasp escaped Aura's lips as she marveled at the monster. It was impossible to call forth such an elite elemental with regular summoning magic. The look on her face was like a kid who'd gotten the toy she'd always wanted. Want to try fighting it? Huh? What? She was lost for a moment, but then the natural smile of a child played across her face. Actually, for a child it was a bit well twisted. Mare's expression was childlike. You'll let us fight it? Sure, I don't mind. It's no big deal if it gets defeated. Momonga shrugged. The staff's power allowed him to summon one a day. In other words, it didn't matter if this one got taken down. He could summon another one the next day. I just remembered something I have to do, Mare. She grabbed him with an iron grip when he tried to escape. Apparently she wasn't going to let him get away. She snagged him with her smile. To Momonga, it was the smile of an adorable little girl, but he wondered if it looked different to someone with the same face. Mare was scared stiff. Aura dragged him in front of the primal fire elemental. His eyes darted around seeking help. Finally, he found Momonga. In reply to his radiant ear-to-ear grin, Momonga joined his palms to mimic a prayer. The light on Mare's face went out. "Well, don't overdo it, you two. It'd be silly to get hurt." "We won't," Aura responded cheerfully. Mare's voice was there too, but gloomy, like he was being escorted to his doom. Momonga figured they wouldn't get hurt as long as Mare was there, so he used his connection to the primal fire elemental to order it to attack. The twins engaged the roaring flames of the attacking elemental. Aura was forward, and Mare was in back. Aura double-wielded her whips to lash the hovering monster into submission. Mare's magic steadily racked up damage. Yeah, I figured this would be no problem for them. The battle may have been one-sided, but he continued to watch, while he went over in his head the other things he had to investigate. He'd already confirmed that magic and some items worked, but there were still other items he wanted to check, most importantly, scrolls, staves, and wands. Objects like these contained magic. Scrolls were single-use, while staves and wands came with a certain amount of casts. Momonga possessed quite a few of these. He was the type that felt using up consumables was a waste. He refused to use the highest-grade recovery potions, even on the final boss. He'd gone beyond cautious to plain stingy, so his inventory had just piled up. In Yggdrasil, they'd been stored in his item box, but where were they now? Recalling how he used to open his item box, he stretched his fleshless hand into the air. He felt it slip into something. It was almost like breaking the surface tension of water. He was sure an onlooker would have thought part of his arm had disappeared into the air. Then, as if he were opening a window, he made a broad sliding motion to the side. A window did open, right in the air. Inside were several staves, lined up all neat and tidy. This was definitely Yggdrasil's item box. He moved his hand to scroll through what he supposed one could call his inventory screen. Scrolls, wands, weapons, armor, decorations, jewels, potions, and other consumables. He had a vast number of magical tools. Momonga's face broke into a relieved smile. With all this, I should be able to protect myself even if everyone in the tomb turns against me. Still absent-mindedly keeping his eye on Aura and Mare's fierce battle, Momonga summarized all the information he'd collected so far. Are the NPCs I've met programs? No. They were beings with consciousness just like humans. It was impossible to capture such subtle emotions with code. He needed to assume that they were no longer programs, but had somehow become equivalent to humans. And what is this world? That was unclear. Considering Yggdrasil's magic existed, it would be valid to suppose he was inside the game, but taking into account the previous answer, that couldn't possibly be the case. That said, it was either the game world or some other world, one of the two. Not that either made any sense. How should he conduct himself? He'd confirmed that he could use his powers as he could in Yggdrasil. So if all the NPCs and monsters in the Great Tomb of Nazarick were also based on Yggdrasil data, he would have no enemies. The problem would be if there was something not from Yggdrasil, but all he could do was cross that bridge when he came to it. For now, he had to just act with the dignity of a ruler, assuming he could muster such a thing. What was the plan? He needed to gather information. He didn't know what this world was, and at the moment, he was like an ignorant tourist. He needed to keep his wits about him and cautiously gather as much information as he could. Should he try to get back to his world? Good question. If he'd had any friends, he'd probably try to go back. If his parents were still alive, he'd risk his life to find a way back. He'd had a family to take care of or a lover, but he had none of those things. He went to the office, worked, came home and slept. Up until now, he logged onto Yggdrasil and kept things ready in case any of his guildmates wanted to come back. But he didn't even have that anymore. Was there any point in going back to such a world? But if he could get back, then he knew he should put in the effort. One could never have too many options. The world outside the tomb could very well be hell. Okay, what do I do? Momonga's lonely words to himself evaporated into the air. The primal fire elemental's gigantic body disappeared, as if melting into the air. The heat that had been thrown around the area rapidly dissipated. Momonga also felt the bond of dominance he'd been vaguely aware of break. The primal fire elemental had extraordinary destructive power and stamina. But for Aura, who demonstrated impressive evasive action and had complete immunity to the fire damage that had been hitting everything in the area, it might as well have been target practice. Of course, if she had gotten hit, she would have lost a significant portion of her health. But Mare, as a druid, would never let that happen. He used an appropriate mix of buffs and debuffs to support her. Their style of fighting was a magnificent division of roles between forward and rear positions. Momonga was struck both by that and by how raw the action had felt. It had been a real fight, not something from a game. Magnificent, you were both wonderful. The children smiled at his heartfelt words of admiration. Thank you, Lord Momonga. It's been a while since we've gotten such a workout. The two of them casually wiped the sweat from their faces, but the moment they did, it beaded up again and began to drip down their tan skin. Momonga silently opened his item box and took something out for the first time in this world, the bottomless pitcher of water. Yggdrasil had systems for eating and thirst, etc., but since Momonga was undead, none of them applied to him, so he had never used the item himself. He'd been using it for his mounts. The pitcher was made out of a transparent material that seemed like glass and was filled to the brim with fresh water. Perhaps the water was very cold, so countless droplets had condensed on the outside of the container. Next, he took out 2 clean glasses, filled them, and offered them to the twins. Aura, Mare, please drink this. What? We couldn't possibly, Lord Momonga. Why, yeah, we don't need to trouble you for that. I can make water with my magic. Aura waved her hands in polite refusal, and Mare shook his head quickly back and forth. Seeing them like that made Momonga wince. Oh, come on, it's water. Just a small token of my thanks for all your hard work. Aura and Mare, blushing, nervously reached out their hands to take the glasses. Thank you, Lord Momonga. I can't believe you're pouring drinks for us. Does it really make you that happy? This time Aura didn't refuse, but took the glass in both hands and gulped it down. The movements of her throat were clearly visible. Water overflowed from the corners of her lips and ran down her lustrous neck, disappearing into her chest. Mare held the cup in one hand and took measured sips. The difference in their personalities was abruptly apparent just from the way they drank. Watching them, Momonga brought a hand to his own throat. He felt like there was a membrane stretched directly over his cervical spine. He hadn't felt thirsty since entering this body, or tired. He understood it was only natural for an undead to not feel those things, but the idea of not being human anymore seemed like a joke. He felt around his body some more. Skin, flesh, blood vessels, nerves, organs. He was missing all manner of things. He had a body made solely of bone. He'd known that, but now he groped around so it would sink in. His sense of touch was slightly dull compared to when he was human. It was almost like there was a thin cloth between him and anything he went to touch. Meanwhile, his other senses performed outstandingly. His hearing and vision were extremely sharp. Since his body was built entirely of bones, it seemed like it could break at any moment. But he also had the sense that each bone was more solid than steel. Although this body was completely different from his old one, there was a strange satisfaction and a sense of fulfillment knowing it was his. Perhaps that was why he wasn't frightened by his transformation. Want another glass? He held up the bottomless pitcher and offered once the children had finished their water. Nope, that was enough for me. I see, Mare, how about you? Oh, I am okay. My throat's not dry anymore. Momonga nodded, took the glasses back and put them away into the air. I thought you were more scary, Lord Momonga, Aura said softly. Oh, really? I can be scarier if you like. No, I like you better like this. Way better, then I'll stay like this. Aura's animated response had thrown him off a bit. Why, you're not this nice only to us, are you? Momonga didn't know how to respond to her quiet murmurs, so he just patted her on the head several times. She was like a puppy presented with its favorite food. Mare looked on jealously. Suddenly they heard a voice. Oh, am I the first? It sounded younger than one might expect from the tone. At the same time, a shadow spread across the ground. It rose up out of the ground and took on the shape of a door. Then someone walked slowly through. Her whole body was wrapped in a soft-looking raven black ball gown. The gown had a full, wide skirt. She covered up on top with a bolero cardigan. The cardigan featured frills and ribbons. She also wore fingerless lace gloves. Almost all her skin was hidden from view. Only her shapely face was visible. It was unparalleled in beauty. Its almost waxy white skin was exposed. Her long silver hair was gathered to one side and up. Not a strand of it fell in her face. Her crimson eyes had a weirdly jubilant look in them. She was 14 or possibly younger. There was still some child in her. Her beauty was born of that mix of cuteness and adult attractiveness. One thing that was out of balance was how big her chest was for her age. Teleportation is restricted in Nazarick for a reason. Don't just use a gate. You entered the arena the normal way, so couldn't you have just kept walking, Sholtia? An exasperated voice sounded right next to Momonga. The icy tone had lost the puppyishness of just a moment ago. Instead, it was full of hostility. Next to Aura, Mare began trembling again. It was probably wise of him to inch away from his sister. Even Momonga was a bit alarmed by the sudden change in her. The girl Sholtia, who had arrived using the highest level of teleportation magic, didn't glance at Aura. She stood squirming a bit before Momonga. She smelled pleasantly like perfume. "You reek," Aura muttered softly, adding that her undead body rotting might be to blame. Perhaps because she had caught Momonga instinctively lifting his arm to check if he smelled. A dark blue vein stood up on Sholtia's forehead. "Oh, come now, you can't say that Lord Momonga is undead to her. What are you talking about?" "Lord Momonga's not regular undead. He's probably super undead or godly undead or something." Hearing Sholtia and Mare express their satisfaction with that explanation, Momonga felt somewhat insignificant. He didn't know what it was like here, but at least in Yggdrasil he was just plain undead. More to the point, super undead and godly undead didn't exist. "Still, what you said was kinda bad. You think so? Okay then, take two." "Ahem, maybe it's because of your rotting dead flesh." "Ah yes, that will do." Accepting Aura's second take, Sholtia slipped her arms around Momonga's neck to embrace him. "Ah, my master, the sole being I cannot conquer." Her wet tongue showed itself between her parted red lips. It moved as if it were its own separate animal. Sweet-smelling breath came from her open mouth. All of this would have been extremely becoming of a bewitchingly beautiful adult, but at her age, something was off. The awkward mismatch was even a bit endearing. She wasn't tall enough, so instead of embracing him, it just seemed like she was trying to hang from his neck. Momonga was unaccustomed to attention from women and was plenty bewitched. He nearly took a step backward, but made up his mind to stand still. Was her personality always like this? He couldn't get the question out of his mind. But Peroncino wrote her backstory, so this was entirely possible. That guy loved porn games more than anything, and had even adopted "porn games are my life" as his personal catchphrase, and he had written the bio of Sholtia Bloodfallen. She was the guardian of levels 1 through 3, and a true vampire. She was also a little girl who'd been given a pile of X-rated video game character traits. "I think that's enough," Sholtia responded to the low, hard voice and sneered at Aura. "Oh, hello, Squirt. I didn't see you there." Momonga didn't feel like pointing out they'd just been talking a moment ago. Ignoring Aura and her twitching, irritated expression, Sholtia addressed Mare. "It must be hard for you to have such an odd elder sister. You should get some distance from her as soon as possible. If you don't, you might end up the same way." Mare's face went sickly pale. He knew she was using him to pick a fight with his sister. But Aura smiled. "Shut up, Miss Fake Boobs." "She dropped a bomb, how'd you know?" "Ooh, she broke character," Momonga said to himself. There was no sign of her forced elegant cool. "One glance is enough to tell. Look how bizarrely poofy they are. How many layers of padding did you use?" Wah Sholtia flailed her hands as if to erase the words out of the air. Now she looked her age. Meanwhile, Aura had an evil grin on her face. "If you use that much padding, I bet they must shift around when you run, huh? Yeek." Sholtia emitted a strange scream now that she was caught. "Bullseye, nay heh. Your boobs slip, so that's why you used a gate so you could get here in a hurry without having to run." "Shut it, pipsqueak. You don't have any." "I at least have a little. I mean, I'm pretty big." Sholtia frantically fired back, but Aura only grinned even more evilly. Sholtia took a step back as if she'd been shoved. She was trying to inconspicuously shield her chest, which was kind of sad. "I'm still only 76. I've got plenty of time ahead of me." She thought being undead with no future was tough. "You don't grow." Sholtia groaned and retreated farther. She had no comeback for that, and it showed plainly on her face. Aura noted this and stretched her slit-like grin even farther. "You should be satisfied with what you got, PFT. Now that you said it, you can't take it back." Sholtia's gloved hands began to exude a shimmering black haze. Aura had her whips ready to intercept. Before the two of them stood a flustered Mare. Momonga felt like he was watching a scene from the past and couldn't decide whether to stop them or not. Peroncino, who had created Sholtia, and Bubbling Teapot, who had created Aura and Mare, were brother and sister. They used to have good-natured squabbles sometimes like this. Momonga almost felt he could see the shadows of his former guildmates fighting behind the two NPCs. What a racket! Momonga was basking in reminiscences of his old guildmates when the hard, twisted voice of something not human speaking human words stopped Aura and Sholtia's quarrel short. Standing in the direction from which the voice came, who knew how long he'd been there, was a grotesque figure, throwing a chill into the air.